to the cloud. So we are recording part 2 of R622 week 2 to the cloud, up in the cloud somewhere. We're going to download from the cloud later, and people will watch this show later on the playlist, and they'll right away be jumping into this one because they want to take a true leap. That's what this session is all about, enabling us, not us really, people who might not have access to technology to take that true leap, you know, jump frog, what do you call it, frog jumping or something like that. You know, people are being left behind, as Robert was just pointing out. People who are left behind, how are they gonna, you know, fare in this digitally rich age, that, you know, this 21st century, the year 2023? And Sunny's got some answers. And Sunny's an alum of IU. She went to the Kelley School of Business around 2007, 8, somewhere in there. Maybe graduated a couple of years after that, and has been working at St. Thomas as a tenured professor. Is on sabbatical now, and while she's on sabbatical, her and her husband Sandeep have co-founded and worked on, well, actually for a few years now, have been working on something called TrueLeap. It's explained to you in the email that I sent to my students earlier. I sent you some slides as well. And so, Sunny, what I would like for you to do, maybe to start us off, is to explain what it is in your own words before we go to the slides, so that we can get it in, you know, to hear it expressly from you without any slides making students pay attention to all these data points. And then what I'm going to ask the Bo to do is create a Jamboard and put the link in one more time, the Jamboard for questions for Sunny, so we can get all of you to ask questions of Sunny. After she presents, after she discusses, I'll ask her some questions, but I want you all, anyone who's, and all my friends who I invited in. So I've invited more people than, you know, my class. There's others who are here who are not in this class. And hey, Zhang, and hey, Millie, thanks for coming. And again, Minjin, and there are others as well. So thank you all. So first of all, is there anything that you want to clarify that I got wrong? I didn't really do a proper introduction. So you want to extend that explanation of your bio and your passion for IU, number 1, and what your passion for TrueLeap, number 2, and what it's all about.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Bonk, for having me. And I'm absolutely honored, not only because this is the perfect class, I couldn't really wish for a better class to share my own journey and what TrueLeap is all about, but I also wanted to thank the special guests. I really felt like what a nice, you know, assembly of collective intelligence we have in this class. I also think, Dr. Bonk, you are not only a thinker and a visionary, but also a doer of your own theory of open innovation, right? Just look at this class. You have your regular doctoral students, master student, graduate students, but you also have guests from all over the world. So I'm absolutely privileged and very delighted to be here. Maybe I'll start from who I am. I am a very proud IU alum. I was in Bloomington 2004 to 2009. In fact, I still have my IU number, even, you know, this day, 812. So I was majoring in marketing while minoring in social psychology, and my teaching actually started there because, you know, by now I've been teaching for 20 years in 4 universities, from University of Alabama to Indiana University to Colorado State, and then in Houston at the it's a private Catholic university called University of St. Thomas, been over 10, 11 years. So currently on sabbatical and full-time building TrueLeap. So the reason is, maybe before I get to the specifics, you know, a little bit of my research background. In fact, back in China, when I was doing my master's in applied psychology, that was 2000, guys, like over 20 years ago, I designed an app to conduct online survey about risk perception in e-commerce, because people were resisting when the starting point of shopping online, right? There's a lot of factors that people are concerned. Essentially, these are the reasons for innovation adoption, or say resistance to innovation adoption, right? From a psychological perspective, what are the factors? And then, I collected data over OICQ, like QQ, MSN Messenger. If you guys remember back in the old days, it really shows age. For my master's research, and then I came for my PhD. During that time, if you remember 2004-5, that was the booming of MySpace and Facebook, where the user base was increasing, right? But they were unable to capitalize the user base because whatever ads they put in the social media site, people weren't looking. In fact, the eye tracking research even shows that people were looking at anything that they were avoiding anything that looks like an ad. So although Facebook claimed to have better targeting because you can actually define the area, interest, and a bunch of variables, but just imagine if you're going to a party, you're there to stalk people, right? You're gonna ignore the ads and everything. So essentially, I came up with the theory of contingency in terms of tie strength and network structure. Essentially, when you're in a social network, imagine where you are in the network and how you are connected with everyone in the network and how others are connected, and that is affecting your decision making and attitude when it comes to new product adoption. So in other words, is to look at the effects of network tie strength and structure on innovation diffusion. So that's like my training and my research, and they never turn into a startup. That's why I admire Dr. Bonk's efforts early on, because he's really not only an educator, but a doer, right? A practitioner and a pioneer entrepreneur starting his own technology company way ahead, right? I wish I met you back then. But essentially, I continued with my academic career.
Sunny, can I interrupt real quick? I never introduced your last name. So those of you watching the recording, it's Chang, Sunny Zhang. Is that right? Saying that right? Yes. And I also will mention a couple more things. So I had a company called Survey Share. So I like you building a survey tool. And it still exists. You can go to it. We had someone join. A former student has joined us from Bangkok. Sandeep Chandrapanraf, who's my partner in Wikibook research, and we've just written an article on Edubuntu, which is very similar to TrueLeap because
I read the article.
Yeah, so we just got it in review in Tech Trends. Sudhiporn, do you have your camera working? You want to say hi? It's early.
Looks like he's driving.
6 a.m. in the morning.
Yes, I'm driving. Good morning from Bangkok and good evening there. Nice to meet you, Sunny. Because you're a former student, I think we have met, but a long time ago. We probably we probably walk by each other. So it's very nice. And I'm still continue. I just got in this Zoom. So I'm hearing what you're saying about the social media, and it's very interesting. Right now I'm teaching in Mahidol University, the Institute for Innovative Learning. So it's very, very intriguing, your topic. Nice to meet you, huh? And nice
Thank
to meet
you so much. So Dr. Bonk sent me your draft. It's still, I guess, under review, right? Congratulations, by the way. It's such a beautiful paper. I hope together we could work on something and generate more publications like this. By the way, I also want to share with you. You probably know Peter very well. Peter Boom, who's IU Global Gateway director that is in charge of the entire. Yeah, I know, yes, Dr. Bonk, you probably know Peter too. Yeah. We were literally in Zoom at like 10 o'clock last night, planning to add another chapter in my neighborhood. Because, just by grabbing everybody, we already have like 50 active people plus 180 people in Houston. That's all from IU. So I wanted to share with you because he's right there in Thailand with you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll interrupt again. IU has global gateways in Bangkok, in Beijing,
in fact,
in Mexico City, I think, and in Germany. I think it's Munich, but it might be another city in Germany, and maybe one more global gateway. So those are creating international connections. So thank you, Susie Bourne, for jumping in here. Sunny, you can go.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's totally relevant, Dr. Bonk, because believe it or not, we have been working with IU Global Alumni network because our alum in different countries, they're all at very top positions with great connections. So they are critical in our business development process. So I felt like it's such an organic growth, across the board, which is why I want to make this more like a storytelling style instead of, as you said, like slide by slide kind of data points, because you are all very close to my heart. Just like, thinking the fact that we're all part of IU family makes today's session very special for me. So let me continue my own, I guess, personal and professional development after graduating with my PhD in marketing and minor in social psychology. I went on and became a faculty member at Colorado State University, while my my better half, my life partner and also business partner, Dr. Bonk mentioned earlier, Sandeep, we met in grad school 20 years ago, literally when I was fresh off the boat. Didn't have friends and family, and became friends and family and business co-founder together. So he's always in Houston. So after 8 years long distance, after our first baby was born, I finally decided to move from Colorado State to a small school, at University of St. Thomas. So that really changed my career path, because keep in mind, IU, we are like top tier research university, right? But with that family, family situation, I found myself in Houston and right in the heart of Innovation District. And because of my work over these years has always been very, centered around innovation, diffusion, adoption, the behavioral science, and of course, global marketing, international business. And of course, it's also not a research school without a lab, without a lot of resources on research side. I really started working very closely with startups. And we started our studio 2017 after I got my tenure, because we feel like there's way more we could do to link academia with business, because there's a gap. Speaking of leaving behind, right? It's not like we don't have the technology. It's the fact that technology is stuck and not in the vast market in needs. So essentially, as I mentioned, since I didn't have my lab, I called my venture studio Z Lab. LAB literally stands for Linking Academia with Business. Z stands for the last letter of the alphabet. Of course, I also go by Dr. Z, but that's not the reason. It's not ego. It's actually the opposite. It's the last letter of the alphabet, which represents the little guys, right? The nobodies, the early stage startups, the under, appreciated, underrepresented, underserved communities, the women, the minority, the immigrants, the fresh off the boat, the new kid on the block, essentially just have that kind of spirit. And then we rebranded as Born Global Ventures. And Dr. Bonk, you will love this, because people think, okay, Born Global is all about immigrant founders or say globally scalable companies. But since we're talking in the academic setting, if you guys look into the literature, Born Global actually came from at least 50 years of research, and originally came from IU too. I believe it's Professor Patricia. I mean, I had her in my graduation celebration party. I remember she said, keep your head down. Like, everybody, before you get tenure, just keep your head down. Anyways, so it's actually a stream of research that shows when companies have a global strategy from day one, in other words, born global companies, they're more likely to scale, they're more successful, because instead of the traditional expansion where a mom and pop company starts with a local shop, expanding to the city, to the state, to the country, and then go international, you can actually go international from day one at the very beginning for a lot of import-export company, but later on for a lot of technology companies. So that's really the spirit behind everything we do. Especially when it comes to technology, we believe that while our neighbor Elon Musk is sending humans to Mars, we also need to bring lights to a lot of dark corners on Earth that are still, lacking the technology. So with that, I also wanted to share, as a teacher for 20 years, I've been using learning management systems because IU always have the most, take advantage, everybody. IU has such amazing tech support, not every university has. So I was spoiled, but then turns out that's not everywhere. And it's not every university having the, intranet, the cloud-based, like, everywhere you can access. So essentially, I realized that number one, all these learning platforms didn't start when COVID happened, right? We've been using it for the past 20 years. It's just like only universities and institutions with a lot of budget, of course, thanks to the tuition, unfortunately high for students. But essentially, universities have the budget to purchase expensive software. And then over COVID, a lot of public school systems in the United States start to adopt softwares like Canvas and Blackboard with government funding. But what I observed, number one, they're expensive. Number two, they're very complicated. I still remember, when we switched online, although for me, I was teaching 8 years online already by then. So my class, I felt like we're pretty well prepared when we did the switch, but I witnessed my own kids struggling and, always behind on their homework. And I never had to, I'm the opposite of tiger mom. Like, I'm a free range chicken mom. I never had to worry about their academic performance until I was like, how come it's so complicated for the kids to navigate? Not to mention, if I, as someone who's been teaching online, is having a hard time tracking assignments, I can't imagine how the teachers and the parents and the students are dealing with it. So we were like, let's develop something that's much simpler and cheaper and more intelligent, because I also think it's so dumb that you don't even know what's happening. As a teacher, I felt like I should know who are actively engaging, without having to call roster every 15 minutes to know who's actively engaging, right? But essentially, that was our motivation at the early days. We started checking with a lot of small schools, like after 3 o'clock, kind of, small schools. They don't have huge budget, and they had to almost like become an octopus, piecing together all kinds of apps with a combination of Google Drive, Zoom, Google Classroom, chat, email, like all kinds of apps. It's like one session, they'll need a dozen apps to keep track of everything. Essentially, technology become almost like a hurdle instead of an enabler. It's supposed to make teacher and students' life easier in terms of their learning process and teaching process. But turns out, in the meanwhile, that's like the struggle of small schools with limited resources. On the other hand, I also have friends, because I'm also a program advisor at Women in AI, which is a global nonprofit organization supporting women in artificial intelligence, advocating for diversity inclusion. And some of the founders I work with actually are teachers from public school system. Diana, for example, in Atlanta, had to, when they adopted Canvas, she had to take 2 weeks training in order to teach, which added a lot of burden in her regular activity. Imagine all the stress we're already experiencing. I was like, it's ridiculous. Couldn't you just open the browser and get started? So that's essentially the rationale behind why do we need something that's simpler and cheaper and smarter. At the beginning, I was literally doing research pretty much every day with school teachers, principals, asking, what do you want? Like, give me a wish list, right? I'm building this for you. It's very much research-driven product development rather than some genius think about, this is cutting edge, let's make the most advanced thing and then go to market. It's literally hand in hand developed with teachers and school principals, and of course, students and parents too. And to answer Jill's question earlier about the dashboard, that was requested by a school principal, because unlike in the physical campus, you can just walk around and know what's going on. For her, she has no idea what's happening in all the Zoom classrooms. Like, she's got hundreds of Zoom classrooms at the same time. We're like, hey, we could actually have all the data feeding into a live dashboard, so what's happening in different campuses, in different classrooms, different teachers, different students, which teachers are burning out, like overloaded, which students are at risk, always late or unable to submit homework, and also which classes are popular, like people always show up with a lot of interaction. You may want to add more sessions, right? So essentially, that's the development process. But the breakthrough for us is really what I call the rise of the rest. Because I'm a heartland girl. I wanted to say, like, I came from heartland China, and I also consider myself a heartland American, because I went to IU, I taught at Colorado State, and now I'm currently in Texas. So it's very different from coastal, right? And there's actually a rise of heartland America. We'll save in another day, but what's happening is, although the United States already had early adoption of the last wave of technology, we actually are a little behind because all these dinosaurs are occupying our schools, and the switch cost is so high. As I mentioned, everybody hates it, right? The professors, the teachers, it's just so hard to navigate. It takes like a dozen clicks to get anywhere. But the switch cost is so high. Like if you want to switch to another platform after using this for 10, 20 years, it's going to occur like millions of dollars. That's the reason. It's not like we don't have the better technology. It's just like switch cost is so high. That's why we go to so-called Greenfield schools. And that's also when we did more research and realized, okay, it's not just the small schools in the neighborhood. It's also 80% of students all over the world don't even have any access. As we were complaining about, okay, how the system we're using are out of date. But in the meanwhile, imagine only 22% of students have something at all. And about 80% of students don't have anything. And that's what motivated us. Okay, let's go. And because, as I mentioned, my partner came from India. In fact, otherwise Sandeep would join us today, Dr. Bonk, because he's currently in India implementing in hundreds of schools. But essentially, we, as I mentioned earlier, when we started our venture studio, it's a model where we are building everything in-house. Essentially, imagine early stage startup. You actually don't need your whole full swing development team, marketing team. You can actually, multiple startups can share the same team. And as a result, you minimize your cost and you maximize your capital efficiency. So in other words, we have a software team on the ground in India, and it's very easy for us to take this and build over there while running pilots. This is a state in northeast India by the foothill of Himalayas. If you know the Sikkim area, the Nepal, like essentially the northeast area that's like in the mountains area, where again, it's sort of, not considered the mainland India and a little hard to reach. But they have a very strong education tradition, partially because there are a lot of Catholic schools in the area. When the British discovered oil, by the way, that's the first oil field in Asia 100 years ago. It's so funny. I have to mention this, Dr. Bonk, just to keep everybody engaged. So they had elephant workers building railway. If you guys remember East Indian Company time, where they were building railway using elephant workers and set them free to rest in the jungle, have fruits overnight, and come back to work, only to discover they have this, black gooey thing on their feet. Guess what? That's crude oil. And that's when they discovered oil in that area. And the town Sandeep grew up with is called Dig Boy, because it's like dig, boy, dig. Anyway, that's literally where he is right now. And he grew up in, these Catholic school where he was able to get early exposure of, computer. And I felt like the early exposure makes such a difference in our life, right? So that's why, from an impact perspective at our age, having already been successful in our corporate and academic career, like we want to really make a difference. And we believe education is a fundamental human right that every child in the world should have. And it is really how we found each other, how we are, what brought us to where we are today. And we believe it, everybody should have that. Yes.
So you want me to pull up the slides? And
yes, I think that's a great starting point.
While I'm pulling them up, could you redefine Greenfield schools?
Yes.
Or clarify it? And I'll pull up those slides.
Yeah, this is a perfect point to pull up the slides, because we're getting to the data and why we are targeting these emerging markets and developing countries, and specifically Greenfield schools. As I mentioned, in the US, right, because people always say, hey, it's so competitive, you're never going to You're never going to compete with Blackboard and Canvas. And guess what? Our response is we don't. It's like, let them be where they are. We are going after schools that didn't have anything at all. So Greenfield schools, and in fact, Greenfield, this word is borrowed from investment. Is like usually in a country where they don't have anything yet, you're building from scratch. So that also gives us, looking at the title, an ecosystem approach, because you can actually systematically build something. It's not just a piece of software or this and that, but specifically when it comes to software or learning management system, content management system, this is what we call first-time adopters, Dr. Bonk and everybody. So essentially, they haven't used anything like Blackboard and Canvas. That's why we don't incur any switch cost. If they already have something, including IU, right? From what I heard, by 2025, we're going to reevaluate, because it's a matter of time these dinosaurs go extinct. But before they do that, we don't intend to go after the users that already adopted, just because the switch cost is so high. The customer acquisition cost is going to be very high. It's going to take a lot of time to onboard them. But then in the meanwhile, in emerging markets, especially Southeast Asia, Africa, these places, they have strong demand. They understand. Yes, blue ocean, Rachel, you're absolutely right. A similar word is like blue ocean, where you don't have a lot of competitors. You don't have like essentially, as opposed to red ocean, where all the sharks are fighting each other, then, you're in blood area. So this is specifically, Dr. Bonk, if we go to the next slide.
Yep. So an ecological approach to improving global access to digital education is a true leap.
Yes, this is our mission. So we are a global digital education company headquartered in Houston, and we're focused on developing affordable technology solutions to address the ever-growing digital divide and access to quality education worldwide. So a few keywords, as you see, one is it has to be affordable. The other one is we are targeting a global market. Anyone that's been left behind, and specifically emerging markets and resource-limited learning communities in developing countries. So if we look at the data on the next slide, I think I covered this part already. This is myself and my partner, Sandeep. We met in grad school, 2003, exactly 20 years ago, just like this, in a class. So we found ourselves coming from very different backgrounds, different countries, different upbringing, completely opposite personality. Not seeing the contrast today, maybe another time, but we complement each other very, very well. I'm a marketing major. He's a geology major. In fact, I'm a seller. He's a builder. So that's how we, combine our expertise. Of course, he pitches too as the CEO of the company. And if we go to the next slide, you're going to see the data we were talking about. This is the 20%, 80% kind of divide where the majority of the students in the world have nothing. Although I started complaining about my frustration as a teacher for 20 years, guess what? There are 500 million plus students in the world that don't even have any access. By the way, Dr. Bonk, what we discovered, especially with our friends in Indonesia, talking with the consulate in Houston, is that we're just talking about enrolled students, right? Because we have their data, but there's tons of students that are not enrolled because they don't have access. Let's say Indonesia, as you guys know, it's like thousands of islands, right? When you don't have infrastructure, a lot of kids are left behind because the parents are unable to just transport them from one island to another. So in other words, there's like, I don't even know how many students that are not even enrolled in the current map, like that's been left behind. But with TrueLeap, we're working with Indonesia, we're working with Congo and India. So regardless of where they are located, we'll be able to make sure they keep up with their education. And it's going to solve a lot of issues because, some people would argue, hey, Sunny, once COVID is over, you're in no business. Guess what? COVID is really a wake-up moment for people to realize we need this in an ongoing basis. Even when schools went back to teach in person, they need the digital infrastructure to keep track of learning materials. Just like when we used to teach in person at IU, we have all the homework online, right? We have all the enrollment data and the grades. So there's a digital trace of everything. And guess what? A lot of parts in the world, although we're safe now, but they are suffering from monsoon season, flood, and sometimes there's terrorism. Like there's a lot of reasons kids are unable to reach school, not to mention socioeconomic reasons where they just couldn't, their parents are unable to bring them. So that's why, as a result, these current major market leaders like Blackboard and Canvas, they're unable to penetrate because they're siloed, they're not affordable, and they're also very complex. Let's say, even if you have the money, I'm sure it's the case at IU, because it's the case at the majority of universities, you not only have IT support, you have LMS support. Like you have to have a special number you call for Blackboard and Canvas. Not every school can afford that. And that's why, with a combination of lack of affordable hardware, software, and also content, the majority of the kids in the world, they are really left behind. And we consider this a global crisis. And that also requires a global solution. So if we go to the next slide, as a result, we came up with this entire education technology ecosystem. And I believe this is the core of what we're offering. And also, I'd love to have more discussion with this class because it fits the learning environment theme perfectly. And by the way, Dr. Bonk, you probably remember last time we talked, we were just providing learning management, content management, and marketplace. On the software part, the development of this is really because now we are so excited, under contract with 20,000 schools in Congo. And we realized that, for schools in Africa, it's not just software. They don't even have computers in the classroom. Like they need labs. They need to have essentially we're like, okay, we need to build their infrastructure. And by the way, this is how the business model goes. For each school, imagine if we build one computer lab with, let's say, 50 computers, that would onboard 1,000 students to the digital platform. So I hope everybody understands what it takes to have this entire ecosystem, starting with the infrastructure of laptops, smart boards, AV equipments, just so that they have exposure and they have the basic digital literacy of using computer. And then software can be installed everywhere because, by the way, TrueLeap, the software system, is a cloud-based browser. Anywhere you have a browser, you don't need to have your own device. If your parents have one, if your sibling have one, if your house has an Android phone, you can actually get to the learning management and content management. So software requirement is very minimum. In other words, overall, we believe we could, cover the 20,000 schools with software fairly quickly, comparing with, hardware setup. But we do need to at least cover that part, to make sure the software is in place so that when in school they can experience the lab, but outside school they can continue, because we all know learning doesn't just happen in that 75 minutes or 60 minutes. Learning happens in an ongoing basis. Our software can support them regardless of whether they're in school or in the digital classroom or say computer lab. Now, what they're also looking for is digital content. And bear in mind, everyone, I don't know if you realize that West African countries are all French speakers because of colonial, historical reasons, right? So they can't even use our laptops, guys. They can't use the QWERTY keyboard. They have a ZERTY keyboard. So we have to customize order and, deliver there. And similarly, content-wise, we also need to have local content that is French, based. And of course, we have additional language learning and all, but for their ongoing content base, we are actively looking for content partner. And you're going to notice in the next slide, the whole ecosystem on the software side, where we have, not only the learning management, which is directly serving school systems, we also have a content management, which partners with third-party content providers. Like for example, I just announced on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to connect with everybody so you can keep up with, my updates. But essentially, we just onboarded AI robotics content partner, where essentially we don't make content, we don't develop our own content. We're providing this ecosystem platform where we're bringing all these stakeholders together, right? Whether it's school systems or whether it's content providers. So Dr. Bonk, if we may go back to review the overall ecosystem on the last slide. We also provide training and support. If you see the number 4 bubble where we have trainings for teachers, administrators, maintenance. Keep in mind, computer literacy is not only lacking among students, teachers also need to learn, right? So you can't just like install software and good luck. You can't just bring laptops. In fact, that's what we learned. A lot of countries, they want to digitalize their class, their schools, and they purchase thousands of laptops. But guess what? Just having laptops sitting there doesn't help. And we've literally seen, laptops from, let's say, Microsoft, or like essentially the all these philanthropy kind of effort to bring laptops, but without the whole ecosystem, it's just sitting there as a paperweight. Or like you need to really activate all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, providing the training and support so the teachers can be advocates and can help the kids. And then Dr. Bonk, I'm so proud we have this research section here. This is literally a shout out to our partnership with your class and with IU about how do we measure learning outcome, how do we measure usability, accessibility, and of course these are just a few buttons, a few tags and keywords to get us started. We want to emphasize that everything is because it's so user driven that we are thrilled to have an opportunity like this to work with researchers so that on the one hand you can generate publications and research projects, of course, but on the other hand it really helps us to validate and to improve our interface, and essentially just like how we did the dashboard. And by the way, I also wanted to mention, because I've always been a big fan of information visualization. Dr. Bonk, you probably also know Dr. Katie Buehner at School of Informatics and Information Science. Back then, she was teaching on the side of the main library, and I took her information visualization class, and that had a profound impact on my research, on my practice. So, visualization, so that dashboard had a lot of IU influence too from Dr. Buehner's class.
Yeah. Katie is a world-renowned scholar here. Her husband is too in our psychology department.
I had them both. I took Dr.
Rob Goldstone as well.
Yeah, Goldstone's cognitive, social cognition class. It's also very unique because it was co-taught by a cognitive psychologist, of course, Rob Goldstone, and a social psychologist, Dr. Elliot Smith, was on my committee. Right. So, that was, and I had their girls in the classroom all the time. Like, they have 2 young girls that would sit quietly in the doctoral seminar.
So Sunny, yes. This is maybe the time. I was going to wait till you're done with the slides, but basically, Dr. Zhang is offering us an opportunity for anyone in the class or anyone who's attending, anybody, anywhere, you don't have to be from this class, to potentially do research on this, or evaluation, or usability testing, or accessibility, or reanalyzing some existing data that they have. So if you're interested in doing so, or if you're interested in joining a small team and doing so, we can have a discussion and Bo and I will start it in Canvas. We'll just open up a thread. There's already a couple threads that we could have the discussion in. So so think about this. And I think maybe we'll wait, and when you're done with your slides, then I'll let you restate that again and make a plea to have people get involved in some way, shape, or form. That's why we had Sunny come in week 2 rather than week 15. I asked her to come early in this semester. So you want me to go to the next slide back?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Dr. Bonk, because I want to work with you all throughout the whole semester. And, it's definitely worth, I felt like it's worth the effort, and it's such a impact-driven project, not only helping with your research, but also we are impacting lives of millions, literally. So I'll get to that case study of India and Congo in a minute, but let me also explain why we believe our solution is reducing the cost and affordable, because again, it's very market driven, right? We're not going after the elite, and we're going after the the resource limited, I also have to say they're not exactly bottom of the pyramid where they don't have any resources. It's just like they want more, but they don't have a lot. But they can actually afford. They just don't have it. Like they don't have the hardware or software. They're sort of just like, forgotten areas in this world, but with huge potential, lots of smart people, and families that can afford. But then somebody has to bring it to them, right? And as a result, we developed this modular service model. By the way, I don't know if anybody came from oil and gas industry, energy industry, because that's Sandeep's background. Did I mention he's a geologist that worked at Fortune 500, Fortune 50 oil and gas company, ConocoPhillips, in fact, for 15 years. Essentially, this is how you have shared services and then per school services, and as a result, reduce the cost. Because if each school has to cover this, there's a lot of cost, repeating costs that can be covered. By the way, it's also important to note, from a business model perspective, this is very much top-down B2B. By the way, because we're seeing the user deck and not the investor deck, you're not seeing a lot more information, but I'm covering everything. Because I'm not asking you guys to invest in this. This is the user deck, but it's missing the business model elements. So I wanted to explain a little bit of what is the top-down B2B model, because the first thing a lot of people ask is, hey, is your user students or families or parents or or teachers? Our answer is yes, they are the end user, but they're not the adopter or say decision making of the adoption. In fact, we're not even looking at school level. We're looking at the level above school, what we call school systems. India, for example, we have a contract with a school system that has 150 or 200 schools under a system. So it's equivalent to, I guess, the US public school district. Like one district would have hundreds of schools. So that way, as you see from this slide, the shared service would include the training, the maintenance, the procurement. Imagine we're sending all the computer, literally I'm in discussion with manufacturer. Both Lenovo and Dell are our partners in terms of the global supply chain. Imagine if your own school ship a bunch of laptop versus like let's ship a bunch to a country. It's going to reduce the cost. And of course, the maintenance team can be shared. You don't have to have your IT at your school, like just covering your school. The training can be shared because you can have a couple of teachers from one school and train together. So with the shared service, the cost comes down a lot. And then per school, of course, you need the software, the instructor, and the digital content based on your learning objective, and that's all customizable. And as a result, this is how we borrowed from the oil and gas industry, because they are very cost efficient in terms of reducing cost and making a lot of money. But in this case, it's how we figured out how can we reduce the cost for the resource limited schools. And as you see here, the digital classroom package are customizable and very easy to adopt. It's almost like imagine you have a menu with these elements. If you already have laptops, then you don't need it. Like in India, we're only providing software, including the LMS, learning management system, CMS, content management system, and also content, because a lot of families already have Android, either simple laptop or phones. But then in Congo, setting up the hardware, setting up the computer lab is critical. And then the training and support, right? Depending on the digital literacy of their teacher, of their admin. If you already know how to use computers and different apps, you can just get in and get started, no more than half a day. But if you still need to learn how do you open the document and save a document, how do you, click around, then we will cover that too. So essentially, it's sort of a pick and choose modular, solution for our target market, working closely with different countries and different school systems. All right. So this is the part I think most of us are probably already very familiar. It is the learning management, which is the school-facing part of our software solution. It's designed to be number one, intuitive, aka user-friendly, or easy to use. And then number two, affordable. It has to be cost-effective, cheaper than alternatives. But very importantly, I want to emphasize on the digital intelligence part, because you all know there's a hype of AI in the education technology space, right? There's tons of like ChatGPT plugin, this and that. We don't have those words in our deck. The reason is actually multiple reasons. Number one, it comes with a lot of cost, because right now we're seeing a lot of free plugin here and there, but the amount of CPU, the amount of data, the kind of algorithm that you run on, that adds a lot additional cost. So the kind of target market we are serving, we don't want to burden them with that cost at this point. In fact, if you look at Xiao Kan's Khan Academy latest TED Talk about using AIs for everybody to have a personal learning / teaching assistant, he literally mentioned the amount of data, and they had to raise money. It's nonprofit, of course, based on donation, but our communities are all very price sensitive. That's the reason they're not ready for that yet. Number two, most of the AI solutions we are seeing are in fact developed with English data and Western data. In fact, Dr. Ko, Xiaojing, also a PhD of Dr. Bonk's, former student, shared with me that a professor from Vanderbilt just presented a paper about language education using AI, and it has proven to be very effective with English. However, it's not the case with other languages like Spanish or Hindi, just because the amount of data is lacking, right? Comparing with the dominate, think about the sample size and the sampling in the current AI language training. So, the researchers had to purchase 10 years of Hindi newspaper from India just to train, Hindi language education. So that's the other reason. Places like India, by the way, in the state of Assam alone, we already deployed 11 languages. And as we go to Congo, we're gonna also implement French, right? So these are all missing pieces in the current AI data set. And that's the reason we're not emphasizing that right now, but we do have co-founders that are top machine learning scientists, AI scientists, that will be, doing more like local-based data training. So we will be gathering a lot of data. And again, I'd love to work with all you guys to see what can we do to generate insights from the data to customize and improve the software and the entire learning ecosystem. So that's something I wanted to bring up, just because it's such a hot topic. Everybody's asking, where's AI in your so right. We are specifically saying, hey, for the schools we're serving, that's not a priority. Let's cover the basic ground, the digital infrastructure, and then we will get there, and we will for sure get there. But that's not something we are doing right away.
Sunny, I'll just point out, and
yes.
all the students are in 622. In week 14, I have 2 articles with Xiaojing Ko in their 2 recent AI articles that she was just referencing there. Sunny, maybe in the next 5 minutes we need to go to Q&A. So you have 6 slides left here. But
yeah, I think we covered the most of it. In fact, this is something you guys probably have seen, some screenshots of easy to use, integrate third-party and tracking student performance. I think I covered it pretty well. And you also are more familiar with this part, right? Because that's what we do all the time with learning management system. This is something I also mentioned, because of the bandwidth limit, over here, everybody's got 5G. Over there, just like 3G and simple Android phone. So we make sure that as long as you have a little bit of signal, you will be able to use it on your phone. And this is also where we have the 11 languages localization capability. The reason is, by the way, it does support both synchronized and asynchronous learning. But the reason I emphasize on the language localization is because of, again, the adoption barrier. When you imagine your native language, even if your class is in English, if your app is in your native language, psychologically, you feel a sense of familiarity. So essentially, you're more likely to engage than just like, oh, this is such a new, foreign, scary, intimidating thing. All right. So the next slide, Dr. Bonk, we'll talk about the digital classroom. This is something we're all very familiar in terms of laptops, charging cards, projector screen. These are the hardware pieces that we are working to supply the computer labs in Congo. And then I believe at the end we have 2 case studies. One is the Congo full ecosystem solution. Like I said, they need to build from scratch, including hardware, software, content, training, and research. And the contract covers 20,000 schools for 10 years. And I wanted to mention since we're talking about the ecosystem, right? If you think about it, in addition to student, teacher, parents, administrator, there's also in this case, the Commission of Schools Conventional Catholics. So essentially it's like a Catholic school union or say association. And that is collaborating with Association of Parents in Catholic Schools of Congo. In other words, parents are ready to pay and requested the Catholic school system to bring this to all the schools. And the local partner we have, by the way, they've been working on the ground for 10 years. A contract like this doesn't just come easily, right? But then they do not have the resources to implement in a short amount of time because they want to see it in September. And that's why they came to us, and we, essentially we just hit it, on the way right away, and started the implementation. So that's something really, really exciting. And then this is the India case study where we are partnering with an education company in Assam to provide the content to 500 schools in the next 3 years. And we're also providing the software solution to 50 schools under a pilot project. And by the way, we run also 10 pilots before all these, commercial contracts. And the pilot of 10 schools were done with public school system, just because we want to get the pilot, and it's free, no payment transaction needed. Just get it done, understanding what the local schools need. But now we're mostly working with private school system, just because decision-making process is a lot faster. Everybody's like ready to jump in board, as opposed to dealing with bureaucratic kind of government process. So I just wanted to explain that as well, because you can see the emerging pattern, right? Both in Congo and in India with private school systems. So that's all from the big picture. If anybody's interested, I'll be happy to do a demo of the actual, software. You can see the dashboard. You can see how you can get into the classroom. By the way, we don't even need a Zoom link. You get into the interface. You have a calendar. You know when it is now, and you don't have to dig around to find the class and how do you join Zoom and find the link. You can just get in there, and during the process, it's a built-in video component with a chat that stays. You don't lose all the chats after a session. And you also have an infinite whiteboard where everybody can collaborate, and it stays there. Like, you can zoom out and see the huge picture throughout the semester with collaboration. So I'll be happy to, take you guys, visit there if anyone's interested. But I guess I'll end with call to action. We are looking to partner with Dr. Bonk and everyone in this class, whether you're part of the program or not. But essentially, we're offering this because I'm a researcher, right? I know how hard it is to find empirical data in playground or field experiment labs. Like, essentially, just consider this our own research lab where you can play with parameters. We could test things out to see. We can run A/B testing. We can run experiments, and we can, just have all the analytics from data insights. Because every time a single student interact with the software platform, we're collecting 500 data points. So essentially, there's a tremendous amount of data we can dig around and have some fun and have some insights, and of course, help the kids in these emerging markets and underserved and resource limited learning communities. So thank you.
I just shared your slide link, so you all can all have those 15 slides if you want them. There are others I shared with everyone earlier. I have one or two questions, and I'll open up for everyone else. Bo, is there any questions in the Jamboard so far?
Yes, we have, it's like 6 questions,
Okay.
1 thought, and 1 wondering.
Okay, so you basically answered my question I just had. I was just wondering what data does exist if one was to do a research project with you. What would they have access to, and how are you collecting it?
So there are a few possibilities, because I've done data mining, data visualization, experiment by training behavioral scientists. I think it's really a lot of options, really depending on your research interest, because we want this to also help with your, academic pursuits too, right? Let's say if somebody's more into data mining and analytics, then, as I mentioned, all the data points that we collect at the background can be shared for you to generate insights. So that's more data-driven kind of approach. But if you feel like, hey, I'm interested in the usability elements, or I'm interested in the ecosystem approach, or like if you want to do a designed survey or experiment, we can totally plug in, because it's sort of a mandatory, like, they're in the software, right? So we will be able to do plug-in kind of just like another quiz, imagine, right? So essentially we can either do the data-driven approach, where we have tremendous amount of data. Anybody that's more on machine learning or even just simple analytics can use existing data just from a discovery or say descriptive kind of research approach, methodology approach. But we could also do questionnaires and even field experiments to say, hey, why don't we do this in this school, that in the other school, and we can randomize. And essentially I felt like from a research perspective, I'd love to work with you guys to see what are you interested, because it's a huge field lab. By the way, Dr. Bonk, when I was at IU, we actually had a lab in the mall, the college mall. I'm not supposed to disclose at the time because I think the contract is like within that contract you can't. But we had a 360-degree camera in one of the shops to track the customers, and I did a study about crowding, basically like the social cues. Like, do people tend to go to crowded fixations? Like, does that attract? Anyways, just imagine it's like you have a field lab where you can collect data, either just use descriptive methodology with existing data, or you can design experiments and we can run together.
So Sunny, one thing that students keep in mind, you have to have human subjects, except for machine data driven log data.
Consent.
Could someone do qualitative research, maybe interviewing students in Congo or students in India, along with maybe a questionnaire or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'm definitely open to all kinds of methodology. I would say language could be a barrier. And of course, we have local partners if translations needed, because I think India is a little easier, but Congo will need to require
India, they speak
French.
English, right?
Yeah,
English.
Because you won't. Yeah, this is funny because I realized that all of our Congo meeting needs to double the time. Like 1 hour Zoom has to be at least an hour and a half or 2 hours just because of translation.
So so I've got research in Nepal, and we were able to conduct it. Some kids' English wasn't quite up to par, but we got in teachers as well. But we got through it. It was very valuable, very interesting.
Absolutely.
Bo, let's go to the board. You pick one. Well, anyone who had a question on the Jamboard. Go ahead. Just jump in. Who had a question on the Jamboard? Anyone? Bo, then why don't you read a question from the Jamboard, and we'll let that person explain their question.
Oh, you look like such a pro. I'm jealous of your microphone setup.
I lucked out and I convinced my wife to let me get this year.
Way to go.
Okay, so first question. What does the synchronous class learning environment look like within TrueLeap?
Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
don't
That's
answer that now. Whose question was that? Raise your hand. Okay, it's Rachel's. Rachel, you want to explain more?
What I was thinking was, we've all we're taking a Zoom class right now, and we know
Yeah.
that the host perspective is very limited. And I've seen some
Oh, yeah.
overlays, like one called Class, CLASS, super expensive.
Yeah.
That does things like shows attention, does some eye tracking, can tell what window is on the top of a student's screen, and then it can also do some monitoring inside the breakout rooms. So I'm just wondering, TrueLeap sounds simplified, so it probably doesn't do all of that, but it also probably isn't $60,000 to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, excellent point, Rachel. Again, you know, because I'm not on my device, I can't believe my MacBook Pro is still stuck on the Apple screen. You know what I mean? Like after an hour, it's still stuck. Major updates. But it looks like this where, because again, we all suffer, right? When we share screen, all of a sudden I lost you guys. You know, when we're like we lost chat window, like we can't see things simultaneously, right? So in a way, it's a browser where on one side you see the live classroom, on the other side you have the whiteboard and you have the chat. And by the way, the chat, essentially you have them simultaneously, and you can switch to different configuration where you can make each screen dominate. You know what I mean? Like depending on the class, because math, you probably want whiteboard bigger. And I don't know, art, you might want to do the, you know, visual bigger. So it depends on the class, you can change different configuration. But a few things I wanted to point out. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, they don't lose, like you don't lose your whiteboard. Like it's collaborative. By the way, you don't need the teacher will need a device, will need a laptop. The students can just go in with Android phones and from any phone. Like I'd love to play next time when we have a smaller group with people who are interested. You could just scan the QR code and get to the whiteboard and start collaborating with your phone. And you will see it's an infinite whiteboard where you can just build a section every day or every class and see the big picture. And then for the chat, number one, you have the group chat that will stay there after class. You can revisit, and you're not going to lose it, you know, after class, like nothing happened. You also have note to yourself. Like you can actually have a private note. You can go back. So you don't have to switch from like, you know, the dozen apps kind of situation. We solved that by, you know, on one simple interface, you don't have to go to your notes to take a self note. You can just like in the chat. So this is just like right now. I can let Dr. Bonk know, hey, I sent you the link, right? And you know, I can let Bo know I'm ready for questions. So that you can let yourself like take some self notes, and also, you know, everybody notes. And then going back to the video, it's not Zoom. I have to check. It's Jitsu. I mean, anyways, I'll let you guys know. Like it's a integrated video component that does a few things. Number one, it tracks the activity of everybody's engagement, like, you know, how many students and also their participation time. Like by now I would know, okay, Joe has spoken, you know, Bo has spoken, but I wonder if Amelia, you know, or Johan is going to, or, you know, I'm gonna be, hey, Lena, you're quiet. Like essentially for the teachers, it helps to keep track of everybody's engagement and make sure the quiet people get some attention. And, you know, even this, Evan is nodding, like essentially there's that data points to show, you know, everybody's engagement. Number two, because we are working with resource limited communities, not everybody has constant high-speed internet, right? Sometimes you lose people not because they went, you know, to take a nap, but because they're having connectivity issues. So you can actually see their connectivity level and understand if they're having trouble, and they can actually adjust the video quality, because sometimes we get stuck, right? Like we have to switch off video to make sure the voice comes over. So essentially, we're very conscious about those kind of options where if you are experiencing network issues, you can actually tune your video level so it doesn't take as much bandwidth. So these are just some examples that the video components. But I also wanted to mention, because this is a feature a lot of teachers and admin really love. So before they use our software, imagine a school system with hundreds of schools. It takes them at least 30 to 40 days just to collect enrollment data. You know what I mean? Like, semester started, they don't know how many classes or how many students are in each class. It takes them a lot of time just to collect the data, getting the data from each student, each class, each teacher, getting to the central location. But remember the dashboard, we're actually constantly getting attendance, and Dr. Bonk don't have to read names and put them in a spreadsheet. There will be pop-up window, not constant. You can define, like, so it's not like just call name in the first 5 minutes or 15 minutes and the rest you're good. You know what I mean? So essentially, there's always that, and that's something we can design together, just so students are still there. Like, it could be gamified or whatever, but the teachers don't have to go one by one. That takes a lot of time, but also you're losing the data in the sense that if they just show up during the time you take attendance and not there, you never know, right? So I hope, Rachel, this answers your question in terms of some of the features, especially relevant to the resource limited communities that we're serving.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's a question in the chat window from Jill. Did you want to ask it, Jill, or not? I think you wrote it. It was a while ago.
Dr. Bang, do you mean the curriculum course design?
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to make sure TrueLeap serves as a platform, but it's not responsible for designing the courses for local teachers. So it is the responsibility of local teachers to design their own courses, right?
Oh, can you say that again, Jill? You're saying, are we replacing the teachers or are we enabling them, right?
So it's just the platform, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's something we're very clear. We are not content generators that replace the teachers. We actually enable the teachers and give them the digital infrastructure, so it makes their job a lot easier. Without a lot of repetitive, hard work, because they can reuse a lot of modules. So that's the bottom line. We provide the digital infrastructure, and we work with third-party content provider that is also requested by the school's needs. Let's say there's a huge difference, right? In India, they're covered with like STEM kind of things. They want soft skill because they're a little lacking on that soft skill side. But then, when it comes to Congo, they're looking for basic computer skills and, digital literacy. So essentially, it's based on the school's needs that we're onboarding the third party, content provider. And back to your question, everything we do is to support the teachers, whether it's synchronized learning, where the teachers are using the interface, or asynchronized. In fact, the school in India, the school system that's adopting TrueLeap in India, they're using it for asynchronized because they want to provide additional material outside class, right? It's not like they go into class and they start. Essentially, they're providing this just like 20 years ago when I was teaching at IU. We were teaching in person, but we had, I think, Encores, right? Back then.
Yeah.
Like, that's the learning management system we were using even when we were teaching asynchronized, like we're not teaching online, like we're teaching in person, but we still need that online learning management system or say content management system to support learning.
There's a long story with OnCourse. I called it no course or on
No
curse,
course.
but or on curse. I bet the founder Ali Jafari is a very good friend of mine. He then developed Agile, which sold to Blackboard for $100 million, and then he built the course networking, which one of my doc students did her dissertation on. Course networking is like a cross between Twitter and Facebook and learning management. So he's the father or grandfather of the LMS, which you're trying to replace. And I did invite him in tonight. Course networking he's making free and open access to some point. I know Lena has a question, but does anyone else want to ask a question off the Jamboard? Anyone else has a question? Yeah, Zhang, great.
Hello. I didn't actually post my question on Jamboard, but it's just came across my mind. I wonder what what is something that separates your solution apart from other like dominant LMS solutions that universities in America and other developed countries use, like Canvas and Blackboard or Moodle? And another question is, were there any research done that actually proves in a quantitative way if the developing country students' academic performance actually increased after using your solution?
Yeah, these are excellent questions. So to answer your first question about the difference between TrueLeap and all these other, we have another deck which include a competitor analysis, like a table where we check off what they have. A few from a software perspective to start with. Number one, we are affordable. Like we're much, much, much cheaper, a fraction of the cost. Number two, it's much easier to learn, to use. It's very intuitive. It's not complicated with so many layers and complexity. It's much easier to use. Number three, it is smarter in the sense that, in fact, Dr. Bonk, we already developed the preliminary generative AI where an instructor can just simply ask which students are having trouble. Based on the data, you can actually get results like this. We haven't officially released the feature, but that's in the back office we're developing, and that's missing in Blackboard and Canvas. But very importantly, this is interesting because when I announce, by the way, I do have a strong presence on LinkedIn. So when I announced like, hey guys, I'm building this, I got a lot of outreach messages, including a company based in India that is the representative of Canvas in India. Like they are the exclusive representative in India for Canvas. And they literally said, Sunny, what you guys doing is amazing because Canvas is unable to reach what we call second tier and third tier cities. I don't know where you guys are coming from. I came from a second tier city from China. I wanted to say not everybody in the United States came from New York City, LA, or East Coast, West Coast, right? Rachel, high five, Heartland girl, right? Same thing in India too. Like if you compare Bangalore, Mumbai, they're very like in part with Silicon Valley, even just the salary of developers. But if you go to second tier, third tier, lower tier city, really not much is there. The reason is, number one, it's too expensive and too complicated. Number two, they are not doing any customization. Like they're just taking the US solution over there, and it works for international schools and the elite class. You see what I mean? Like in the top tier city, there is a market for them, great for them, right? But our heart goes to those that are second tier, third tier. They have the purchase power, but they're under, they have limited resources because what options do they have? I pretty much already excluded the expensive kind of options, right? Blackboard and Canvas. What they have is either free apps, including Google Classroom, and I think everybody in this class understands Google Classroom is really not a full-fledged learning management system. They still need a whole bunch of other pieces to stitch together. So that's what they could use. Another one is there are some local developed software, but then they're not as comprehensive and sophisticated. In other words, we are a US company, guys. You also have to understand for developing countries, this is a US software that is affordable and simple to use and willing to customize for either local language or content they're looking for based on their learning goals. So I also wanted to mention, this is sort of off the record, but a strong differentiation. We have absolutely amazing partnership with our local collaborators. And as you know, by the way, I've been teaching international business and global marketing for almost 20 years. A major difference between these countries and the United States is the fact that these are all relationship-oriented culture, as opposed to here, it's more transaction or information-based. Like if it's cheaper or better than you're going after, right? You couldn't care less about like all the relationship parts. But over there, once you have the relationship, that's something, it's like an absolute unfair advantage going into these relationship-oriented culture in developing countries. And not to mention, we're already very cost-friendly. Like if they go lower than our price, they're gonna go broke. So, those are all differentiation factors. But I'll be happy to dig into competitor matrix with you.
So the second question she had, and we want to make sure we get to other questions. So briefly, do you have any studies that compare the development of students in the developing world? Any of your studies?
Oh, yeah, Dr. Bonk. Yeah, excellent question.
Yeah.
In fact, this could be one of the research topics that we work together, like the learning outcome. We do have some data, but the data is focused on adoption because that was like our primary, when we are doing pilots, it's all a matter of, do people want to use this? Like, are they satisfied? So we were able to, by the way, please understand, this is like very much, challenging environment. Like these are places people are not used to use software for learning and all that. So just to adopt itself for us is a major breakthrough. So we were able to get 70 plus positive feedback from teachers. And that's something we consider a big success for the pilots. But now that we're doing more, we are absolutely interested in doing more systematic measurements. And by the way, as you know, I'm not an education major or PhD, right? So I'd love to work with you all to design the assessment and measurement to improve the effectiveness of the system. By the way, we also designed a scholarship program to essentially hopefully work with you guys to develop a way to evaluate their learning outcome and issue scholarship at our annual conference. I already invited Dr. Bonk and maybe this whole class, let's go, India or Africa. Essentially we want to take turns to host in different countries because they're fighting for it. Like they all want to host it. But essentially we want to give out the scholarships for students who are performing and also to teachers who are adopting the innovation so that we provide incentives. And by the way, we can collect data, right? It's not just like voting or like this is going to be generated by the system. And maybe we can even develop some kind of gamification, stickers or certificate along the way to encourage their participation. But this is a great question and something I'd love to collaborate on.
So, and Zhang is interested in doing research because she's new here. She's our PhD student, just started from
Fantastic.
Korea. It's like the initial MOOC studies where in the US we were downplaying them because they didn't make an impact on learning or whatever, but in China they increased access. And the question was access or adoption and access.
Exactly.
The question in the US was test scores and sustainability and retention. And so the questions changed depending on what country you're in. We have time only for one or two more questions. So we're already a little bit over what I promised everyone, and a couple of people have to leave, and I need to meet with some people after this.
Okay.
A group's going to meet me. So who else wants to jump in? Maybe we can get two more in. Does anyone have a pressing question to ask? Emmanuel, did you have something? You turned your video on, so I'm assuming. No. Oh, we can't hear you. Some reason your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry about that. No, I was reading the chats and the comments and things like that. I didn't have any questions though.
Okay.
Just soaking it all in.
Great. Anyone want to jump in? I know Lena has a question. I've been avoiding her because I don't like her. No, I'm just kidding, Lena. She's one I brought over. She's gonna cry now. She won't come to lunch on Wednesday. Okay. So Lena, you want to ask your question?
Dr. Bonk, I just put it on the chat to see. Oh, sorry. Is this someone?
Okay. Sorry, you first. You first.
Sorry, I put it on the chat to see if that's possible to do, because one of your assignments, the learning environment critique and analysis. So I think that's Sunny, I really like your presentation. I can feel your passion for the project, and I think that's a wonderful learning environment. And so I don't know if that's possible to do like the assignment on your learning platform.
Yeah, absolutely. We could, Dr. Bonk, why don't you switch from Zoom to TrueLeap for your future class?
So I
Yeah,
think
I'll
she
be
asked
happy
that.
to.
Yeah, so you asked both of us. So Sahal is from Macau originally, I believe, from her
Yeah.
Padlet page, and she teaches in IU New Albany in psychology or educational psychology courses down there.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
amazing.
about
Yeah.
2 hours from Bloomington or hour and a half. So
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk after. Lena, did you want to jump in and ask your question?
Okay. Hello, Sunny.
I
Thank
do
you
like
for-
Lena a lot. You know, I agreed to let her come
know.
to IU.
You know what, Dr. Bonk, you only pick on people you actually really like because you can, right? So
It's my honor
yeah.
and my pleasure. Okay, thank you for Sunny for your presentation. Very passionate. I really like it. And my question is about the platform function itself. Actually, I really want to try the TrueLeap if I have a chance in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I felt like today, I
Because
still have the Apple screen,
if you
but
know,
I'll be happy to show you the interface. And I can, Dr.
great.
Bonk, I can work with Sandeep to generate kind of a dummy user kind of account for everybody to look around.
Okay. I don't know if you know those platforms being used in China nowadays, like Red Classroom from Tsinghua University, and also Superstar, another platform. And I use these two platforms in my class. And in class, I use this apps on the mobile phone. All my students, they all hold a mobile phone in their hands. Yeah. And I use my mobile phone, and we have interactions altogether during class and after class and before class. I also send all those materials. Or
you're using WeChat probably then to do that.
No,
right?
not WeChat. I don't use WeChat. I just use those platforms.
Okay.
And all the data are recorded on the platforms. In that way, I can have the formative assessment for about 70% for my course and only 30% for the final exam. Because all those study data is in the platforms.
Right. You want to tell her what your job is in China? What your job is in China, Lena?
Yeah. I think everyone knows that.
But Sunny didn't meet you last week, so.
Right.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I work in Hefei Normal University. Okay. Normal university. That means the graduates in my university, they will become middle school teachers.
Yeah.
And I'm an associate professor in the English department, and all my courses nowadays all my courses are in the blended teaching forms, and also I had my MOOCs on some websites, and all those teaching methods that I use nowadays are kind of a smart teaching methods, and that's why I'm very interested in those teaching based on technologies.
Right.
Yeah. That's good to know. I have to say, in the early days in my research, as I said, I spent a lot of time with school principals, including the ones in China. And somewhere along COVID, as everybody knows, due to policy changes, the entire education technology industry was wiped out. So, that's the reason that we did not continue to pursue the market. But I definitely watch very closely because I have to say, let me give a simple example. In the US, do you guys know which company is the biggest unicorn in the United States? Unicorn company is the company with a valuation of 1 billion plus. It's SpaceX, right? So, but in India, the biggest unicorn company is Baiju. It's an education technology company. It's like a huge contrast of where do money go, right? So I think there's a lot of cultural reasons, like Lena mentioned, the priority of education in terms of your dispensable income in the house, and it's like very different in Asia versus in the United States, which is the reason we strategically targeted India as the primary market. I have to say, when China closed the education technology industry entirely, which also hurt a lot of unicorns that used to be like the top rank in the world, India became the biggest beneficiary, because where does the investment go, right? And essentially that's like the boom of India's education technology, but the second tier and third tier cities are sort of left behind. So I guess going back to Lena's observation, we are looking at a few, what do you say, benchmark companies that came out of China meaning a lot of them left because they can't operate there unless they are a nonprofit. So they went to Singapore, they went to Bay Area. They haven't penetrated India yet, or Africa. I think they are popular in European countries where pretty much where Tsinghua University alumni are probably. But what we're seeing is number one, because they originated from the tutoring culture, like all the students are doing after school kind of tutoring. Yeah. They are targeting smaller schools. Like if you go to their site, they're usually like, hey, if you have tutoring, and then when it comes to school systems, you have to call them to find out. In other words, like their primary market are the tutoring kind of, just like VIP kids and all that culture is to support extracurriculum, additional work outside school. And our development is very different. It's like school system. It's like very much top down, development or say implementation of the entire education technology ecosystem. I felt like Dr. Bonk, it's a privilege to be able to do this, because usually if you are going bottom up, right, like going after the students and families, you're not going to be able to systematically address, the challenge a country is facing, or the entire like middle class or say second tier city, like middle market is facing. And I really felt like all the work you've done on open education, open innovation, that inspires me a whole lot. And I wanted to continue working with colleagues in China, just like Lena and others, just to keep track, because I believe you cannot kill edtech in China. Like you can do it temporarily. There's still a lot of demand, and let's continue to observe and see when that's going to come back, because parents want it.
When I was in China in 2015, I went to the MOOCs Times building in Beijing, and those people were developing tons of applications, working 100-hour weeks, and just crazy stuff was going on there, whether it's lecture capture or micro learning or what gaming or mobile apps. I mean, just every place was just exploding. And that was 2015. The amount of companies in China doubled from 2014 to 2015 in ed tech. They went from 400 companies in the whole country to over 1,000 in 1 year.
Yep.
And then it was doubled again. And so there's a lot of emphasis in China and India now on educational technology and educational technology companies. I think, does anyone have a question that she could answer in 10, 15 seconds? Just a quick answer kind of thing, because we're gonna have to go. Anyone else want to jump in, or at least
I have a question.
All right.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, Sunny. So right now it looks like your platform is focused for K-12. Do you foresee maybe branching out to adult learning, or accommodating like asynchronous, synchronous education for adults?
Excellent question. In fact, our bigger vision is the future of learning for all. And when we say for all, it has multiple meanings, right? One is for those developing, resource limited, so they're not left behind. The other one is the ongoing learning, because it's no longer the case where you go to school and you go to work, right? You have to really constantly reskill, upskill. And we didn't bring those studies into the deck because they're not our primary market right now, just because of the size, right? But we implemented TrueLeap with Women in AI. I mentioned that I'm their program advisor by, essentially helping them design the program, but also instead of using Zoom, we were using TrueLeap for the startup development program. And another user scenario is with Impact Hub. I know if you guys are familiar, it's a social enterprise-driven global network of a startup development program. And all of these incubators and accelerators, and that's considered adult ongoing learning, not to mention corporate training and all that, because that's a competitive space. That's another space. But what has been Greenfield in a way is all these entrepreneurship kind of educational programs that is lacking in our formal years, right? But now everybody wants to start their business, and there's a lot of workshops by different speakers with different expertise, but it's so scattered. There's not a content management or learning management system. So we're actually providing this for those. And what's interesting, Emerald, I wanted to mention is in Africa, we're working with Ivory Coast now, in addition to Congo, because Congo contract already closed. We just need to implement. Now the business development is with Ivory Coast and Togo and other, West Europe, West Africa countries. What they're looking is to transform digital education as well as adding startup hubs. So they're missing that. So they came to Silicon Valley. They came to Houston, trying to see how can we build the innovation hub in our country. And they also realize, unlike WeWork, you can't just put a building and ask people to rent your space and make it a innovation hub, right? You need that software and the digital community piece for ongoing education, especially when you are what I call an emerging, just like emerging markets. This is like emerging startup ecosystem that needs a lot of ongoing training. So essentially, we're exploring which are the best product market fit. And so far, we identified K through 12 because of the scalability. And of course, some universities are interested too, but that's not like size-wise, it's not as big. And then the other niche is the entrepreneurship training. That's also partially because I've been doing this for so long, like I'm more known in that space. And they're in a way, they're like the real world school, right? By ongoing learning. And they don't have any digital learning management system at all, unlike the existing school. So we also consider them Greenfield and first-time adopters, because they've been using Microsoft Teams and Zoom, where you lose everything after a session.
So, Emmanuel, yeah. So the answer is yes to your question. I think we're gonna have to. So
yeah, but I do want to mention the corporate learning part. That's very competitive. We're not going there. I just wanted to mention that, because we want to go to, bottom line is Greenfield, so-called blue ocean. Wherever that's competitive, we stay away from it, because we don't want to waste time and energy fighting with others. So we just want to serve those that's been left behind with a huge market need, and they actually have the budget to really, like Congo parents, they're waiting. They want it. So let's go. Let's bring it to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Let's give a round of applause here. You can yes, very good. We learned a lot tonight. We definitely did. I did. I know everyone around here did. There were great questions that were asked. It was a really great opportunity to have you as the first guest speaker in the second iteration of R622 that I'm teaching. We'll save this and it'll be on the playlist from the end of the semester. So people will click on this and it'll be the first thing after the orientation. So how appropriate is that? So everyone who watches this this semester, replay it again in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, who knows how long this will replay. They'll be coming back to you for maybe an update of TrueLeap, and maybe they'll sign up to be TrueLeapers and get their license to be all TrueLeapers or TrueLeap evaluators and testers. So talk to me, talk to Sunny, talk to your colleagues about this. Maybe in a Canvas, maybe in an email, maybe on your mobile phones, and discuss what the opportunities might present to you and to someone else. And also in a year, write to Sunny and ask her for updates on the research, or maybe I'll do that and share it all with you. I want to thank you again. I'm going to close off the part 2 of week 2 here. So I'm going to stop the recording. Everyone wave as a final. Wave in the final. Okay.
Should we do a group photo, Dr. Bonk?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording. We